Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. This is part two of a two-part Daily Critique video. Yesterday and today we've been looking at this image that was created by Jill, who's an intermediate photographer from Missouri. In yesterday's video we created an alternative version of this image in Adobe Photoshop CS5. Here are all the changes that we made to the image on one layer. If you want to know the why and how of that work, really encourage you to watch yesterday's video. We said in today's video, in the context of enjoying Jill's image, we would talk about a couple of things. One, we would talk about the basic difference between documentary photography and interpretive photography, and we would also, in the context of talking about the things that I enjoy about Jill's image, I would talk about some things that I believe are hallmarks of great documentary photographs. So many different ways we could define documentary photography because there are all kinds of documentary photography. If we would just want to talk about the big subgenre of documentary photography in the most general sense, when I think about the difference between a documentary shot versus an interpretive shot, I think about the idea that in documentary photography we're trying to convey information in a straightforward way. And in interpretive photography, so much of the time we're making conscious decisions to use techniques as photographers to reinterpret the subject matter or go beyond it or embellish. We could just think about something very basic like lens choice. So much of the time in interpretive photography we'll see extreme focal lengths used that see very different than the way we see as human beings. So we sort of accept that at a very basic level of definition, this is the difference between these two schools of photography. Then we could get into the idea of what makes a powerful documentary photograph. I talk all the time about interpretive photography in the Daily Critique, but not so much about documentary photography. If we're going to shoot in a straightforward way and convey information at the expense of interpreting or embellishing, then to me, for a documentary photograph to be really compelling, then subject matter is very important. And to me, this image is a classic example of an image that has totally compelling subject matter. So many different ways to think about how compelling this scene is. We could just start with the main subject. The sculpture itself is very compelling from a storytelling standpoint. So much the idea of opposites playing back and forth off of each other has a big effect on people that are experiencing story, and just the idea of something as extraordinary and ethereal as a ghost doing something as ordinary as riding a bike. Very powerful storytelling to begin with. Then we could look at the context for the main subject of the sculpture. To me, this is a very modern idea in terms of art, and then this setting for this very modern looking sculpture is something that could be the set for a cowboy western. Not only that, a big part of the background of the shot is this sky, and the moment with this sky to me is incredibly beautiful. Very, very compelling subject matter just in terms of a beautiful part of the setting for the main subject of the sculpture. We already mentioned this classical idea about a documentary photograph where it's more about conveying information, which means that the photographer may be shooting in a very straightforward way, and that is true about Jill's image. First of all, we could talk about the effective focal length of her camera here, the Apple iPhone. Effective focal length is about 40 millimeters, and that is very close to the effective focal length that we call normal in photography. And we call it normal because if we get back with a 50 millimeter lens from a subject like this sculpture, so we're not really close, we stand back so we can photograph the whole thing. We call the 50 normal because we say that the angle of view, excluding our peripheral vision, which is more of a subconscious experience, angle of view and the perspective, the way all these subjects relate to each other from a size standpoint and the feeling of distance from the camera, this focal length approximates the way we would see this subject matter relative to those things I just mentioned if we were standing there. Not only that, Jill's camera position here, instead of being interpretive or extraordinary, very low or very high, seems pretty straightforward. It's like she's standing there and just shooting from a normal height. And the sculpture seems to be looming a little bit because it is up on a pedestal to begin with. Another way to me that this is straightforward is the depth of field. It's a great depth of field. Everything appears sharp with detail, which is the way that we see scenes if we stand back from them and look at them like this. So there are lots of things about this that seem very straightforward and give me the feeling that if I was there I would see this in a very similar way. then to me the final hallmark of a great documentary photograph, we just want to talk about it in the most basic sense, after great subject matter shooting in a straightforward or offhanded way, is that the image is still compelling at the level of design and beauty. And without going way into it, we could just quickly recognize some things that connect to classical unity and balance when we look at this image. The main subject has a real strong feeling of formal symmetry or formal stability in and of itself. And then we look at the way that Jill has framed this. The area around the main subject rhymes that or unifies with it. Real strong feeling of these two ideas rhyming around and making a circle around the main subject, top of this cloud, and the bottom of the overall structure of the sculpture with these rocks that are a base even for the palette here. Then in addition to that, we have some other formula balance ideas. The negative space in the sky balancing with this area here, these two wedges of mountains almost formally balancing each other, and the negative space shapes on either side in the middle ground. Another way that we could say that this image is classically beautiful from a design standpoint is beautiful in basic color relationships. Simple color, but powerful color relationships. Sort of a cyan and tan color combo with some subtle earth tones that are thrown in that are analogous around it. And the other thing is just simplicity so much of the time connects to beautiful design. And the main subject, even though there's a lot going on here, is very high value, which helps it to separate from the other ideas in the image. It's high value because of high contrast and also just because of the recognizable nature of the subjects and the power that they have from an archetypal standpoint in any story. A lot of things to enjoy about Jill's image. Hope you today can think about documentary photography. We talk so much about interpreting scenes, but you might think about this idea of shooting things in an offhanded, straightforward way, but making them compelling by choosing subject matter that is going to be very exciting for a whole variety of reasons to the viewer, and still paying attention to the idea of design. I want to say a big thank you to Jill for sharing this image with us. I want to say a big thank you to you for being here. I hope to see you again real soon on another episode of the Daily Critique.